Engage for Success Radio, raising the profile of employee engagement and shining a light on good practice for people who believe there's a better way to work.
Well, hello and welcome to Engage for Success Radio, show number 605. I can't really believe that we are now in our 12th year of these weekly radio show podcasts, but here we are. And today I'm really excited about the topic because it's one that personally I come across regularly. Clients talk about with me regularly, and it is a topic which I think is really, really important for us to understand. I think there's some number of misconceptions around it, and I'm absolutely certain that today's guest is going to help us to navigate that and clarify some of the things that maybe people misunderstand about the concept. But a little bit more of that in a moment. First of all, welcome to Engage for Success Radio with me, Joe Moffat. Our weekly radio shows are now streaming live on YouTube. So just search Engage for Success Radio podcast if you would prefer to listen to them there. And for those of you who are a little bit uncertain as to who Engage for Success are, a little bit about us as a movement. We're a not-for-profit movement, and we are the UK's leading voice on the topic of employee engagement, raising awareness and running events through area networks around the country and also online, as well as through our topic and sector specific thought and action groups, developing research, publishing case studies, and shining a light on great practice. Do visit us at engageforsuccess.org, where you can learn more, and you can also sign up for our weekly newsletter. I am a volunteer with Engage for Success, as we all are. Everyone who is involved in the movement has a day job. Mine is, alongside being one of the regular hosts of Engage for Success Radio and sitting on the advisory board of the movement, I am also involved and have been involved in running my own business for many years. I was the founder of Woodreed, which I recently sold and which is now rebranded as 7Cs, the culture consultancy. And I'm delighted to still be involved and still able to carry on working with 7Cs clients to help them to create great places to work, high performing cultures of engaged employees. So my bag really, and the things that excite me, all things employee engagement, employee experience, internal communication, and very much the topic of this week's guest, leadership and the coaching and development of leadership to create those great workplaces. And to help us with that, I'm very pleased to welcome today's guest, Gary Keogh. Gary holds an MBA from the University of Bath, and he's a master's in Coaching and Behavioural Change from Henley Business School. He's worked in FTSE 100 as well as family-owned businesses over many decades. I'm sure he'll tell us a little bit about that in a moment, and has sat on various boards for over a decade as well. His master's was around today's topic, and so very, very qualified to navigate it for us today. And so today's topic is psychological safety, a phrase, a word, a topic that people is bandied about very regularly. I think you'll agree, Gary, but I'm not sure that necessarily people really understand what we mean by it. So before I ask you to sort of expand upon that, first of all, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your career, and then we can get into today's topic.
Thanks very much, Joe. Thanks for having me as well. And so, as you outlined, I've worked in marketing roles for nearly three decades until a big career change that kind of started a few years ago when I went to a line manager at my previous organization, said, I love leadership, I love mentoring, I love coaching, but I'd like to understand more about it. And I don't want to do some 2-bit weekend course on coaching. I want to do it properly. So the organization sponsored me to go to Henley and do a master's in coaching and behavioural change, where I specialised in the topic of psychological safety.
And that lit the fire for you.
It definitely did. And I can highly recommend it for people that are curious. I didn't know the difference between coaching, mentoring, leadership the first day that I showed up at Henley, but they start you at base camp, and it's a fabulous, fabulous program.
Excellent. Lovely. Well, great stuff. So we're going to be exploring specifically psychological safety today. So first of all, I guess let's sort of define what we mean by that. Let's get our terms clear.
Yeah, so a textbook definition that people may be familiar with is it means you can speak up without fear of reprisal. So it means you can share ideas or concerns about a direction of travel in the workplace without being concerned that people are going to hold it against you, like it impact your status, or worse, be brought up in a one-to-one or an appraisal, or that you might even lose your job. Another way of describing it in more layman's terms is you can share your perspective and it won't be weaponized against you as well. I think that was someone who helped me with my dissertation on psychological safety. Dr. Sam Mather came up with that definition, which I think is really nice. So you can express yourself without being worried about it impacting you negatively.
And clearly, this sparked something in you when you began your masters. But so, what specifically is it about psychological safety that, from an organisational perspective, and particularly perhaps from a leadership perspective, that is so important? Why does it matter so much?
It matters because silent teams add no value. It matters because if you have people holding back with great ideas, or they spot a problem but they just don't feel they're safe to express it, well, then organizations leave value on the table, and individuals, their self-confidence and their motivation and their discretionary effort can be compromised.
It's intrinsically something that is the responsibility of leadership, though, isn't it? In that, one of the things you often see, and I'm sure you see this too, is people paying lip service to this terminology. Oh yes, it's a psychological. It's important for us to have psychologically safe teams. It's a psychologically safe space. We encourage people to speak up, and they can say all of that, and yet sometimes when the going gets tough, I was going to say something else about hitting the fan, but people don't always follow through on that in terms of being true to that claim, do they? And that could be so counterproductive.
You're dead right, Joe. And I think one of the issues is it's not enough for leaders to open a meeting and say, this is a safe space. I personally think that's a complete waste of time. Like, people have to feel it. You can't say it. And people feel it when leaders demonstrate vulnerability, or they demonstrate curiosity, or they really respond appreciatively when people do share a different perspective that may challenge their point of view. So I think you're right. Like, people shouldn't throw away the phrase because that's to its detriment. People have to feel it, and it's very personal as well. Like, it's not up to me to say whether you feel safe in this particular conversation. That's completely down to you. So it can be very personal. It can also be temporal. It can change throughout the course of a day, let alone the course of a week. And leaders do need to be careful about how they act and behave, because they can build it over time, but they can destroy it in a moment.
Trust. It takes a long time to build and can be very easily destroyed. And is it therefore the responsibility of the most senior team to set out that stall and keep that trust alive, that actually they are demonstrating it and people can believe it and can feel it? Or do we actually have to set out to create this across a whole organization? And if so, do you have to sort of try and do it slightly differently? Is the role of the senior leader and the way they have to create a psychologically safe space different perhaps to a shift supervisor in a production environment or something?
I think, like, you're grappling at one of the key issues here, and let's be very clear that leaders play an outsized role in creating psychological safety, but it's not only down to them. You could have a leader demonstrating great human traits, forget leadership traits for a minute, curiosity, humility, vulnerability, like really great active listening. And that could be in play, but you could still have other peers in a team that are scoffing at the response of an individual, or putting them down, or judging them for their perspective. So I think it's important to say that leaders play an outsized role, but it's not only down to them. It's down to all leaders and all team members as well.
So all of us, in fact, in an organisation, whether we have people responsibilities or not, we have a responsibility to look out for and create a safe, psychologically safe space for our colleagues.
Absolutely, and if you're in an organisation where it's role model from the top, well, then that's a fantastic place to be. But it's really, really important that like anyone who's listening doesn't sit back and say, well, I'm not in a leadership role, therefore I don't need to be concerned about this. That's not true. Leaders do play an outsized role, but it's not only down to them.
Okay, so when I asked you why does this matter, you said, because I'm probably going to paraphrase it, but something to the effect that silent teams add no value. Is that the only reason why it's important to have a psychologically safe workspace?
Well, I mean, the good news is it's been linked for like nearly over 60 years now, scientifically, with when you have teams that can voice concerns or speak up about ideas freely, then innovation and creativity improves, engagement and motivation improves, and ultimately high performance is what you get from a team as well. So like in the last generation alone, there's been multiple scientific studies, whether they're quantitative or qualitative based, that have linked environments where people can feel safe to speak up, improve so many things at work.
And not just the hard-nosed business KPIs of innovation and creativity and performance, but what people might call some of the softer things: health, mental health, physical health and well-being.
I'm allergic to that phrase, by the way. Like
which
soft
one?
Skills,
Which
soft
one?
skills.
Soft skills, yeah.
Because and I'm sure like you know yourself, Joe, that things like people's mental health and their well-being and personal self-esteem or confidence, I almost feel like when any of us use the phrase soft skills, it's almost like saying that those things aren't as important as hard financial metrics. You, me both know well that people's motivation, their confidence, their self-esteem are the things that deliver the hard metrics. If we don't have those in a positive place, then business performance will suffer, the metrics will suffer, the KPIs won't be achieved. So yeah, I wish at some stage, maybe for another day, we could come up with a better description than soft skills.
Absolutely, which can often some of the hardest things to achieve in themselves, aren't they?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've touched on it with leadership, and we've touched on the fact that they have an outsized responsibility for creating psychological safety. But I'm guessing, there's a lot more to it than that. So having recognized it's important, how do we set out to, well, I suppose actually let's rewind a bit and say, not how do we go about ensuring that we've created psychological safety, but how do we begin by knowing whether we've got it or not? And then what do we need to change?
And you know what? One of the things that maybe help us set context to that, because it's a brilliant question around potential measurement, is also to share what psychological safety isn't. So if it is about people being able to speak up without fear of reprisal, what it isn't is it's not guaranteed applause for every single idea that we have. It's not a pat on the back for everything we do every day at work. It's not no stress at work ever at all. It's about creating a candid, energizing place to work where we can speak freely and professionally about our perspectives on the work or the task in hand. And so I think that's important to lay out as well, because I think sometimes people think, oh, well, this is just people being nice to each other, when actually it's not about that at all. And then your point on like, how do we know if we have it? The good news is you can measure this like any other metric in your organization. So the absolute guru in this space, Amy Edmondson, started off a generation of research at the end of the 90s, which includes 7 questions that have been used for 25 years and, without getting super nerdy, have a Chromeback alpha very high, which means it's a high reliability in terms of measuring psychological safety. And you can do the survey in 3 minutes with a team. Now, I would always suggest that people do that and put that in the hands of someone that knows what they're doing, knows what the diagnostic means, and then can run a workshop with the team to improve the dynamics. But you can find out really, really quickly, and you can benchmark it against other organizations as well.
Oh, okay, interesting. Well, Amy Edmondson has been a long-standing supporter, particularly in the early years of Engage for Success, a big contributor to and supporter of the ethos and the message that we've been trying to get out there. So interesting. So yes, I mean it's always the case, isn't it, with these things? It's you can do them, but are the results safe in your hands? And you need to know what you're doing with something to actually make it a worthwhile exercise.
Completely right. And the important thing is if you do measure it, then the important thing is that the results show you not only the median average score in the team, it also shows you the spread of perception. And I think what that does when you share the results with the team is it opens people's eyes to the fact that psychological safety, a bit like beauty, is in the eye of the beholder. And because,
interesting.
Yeah, so it essentially demonstrates one of the measures is willingness to help. So do people feel comfortable asking other people in the team for help? And you can see a score appear on a screen and go, oh, wow, I feel comfortable asking people in this team for help. But actually, the anonymous scores that are measured confidentially shows that other people don't feel the same way. So what role are we all playing in ensuring that people can ask each other for help and they don't feel isolated or stuck on a particular problem?
Yes. So some people's perceptions, as with everything, are different because of their own personal experiences, perhaps, and that they've had their trust perhaps damaged through something that this other person in the team was unaware of and didn't experience.
Yeah, and you're absolutely getting to where the data is useful, because the data is a measure which is interesting, but actually it's far more powerful when it's used to unlock the insight behind the data. So you get the individuals in the team talking openly about why the score is where it is, and that's where you get really under the iceberg to understand what the dynamics in the team are. And that team can then talk about what behavior change would they like to see and what commitments are they going to make together to make it a better dynamic.
Okay, so we've sort of jumped to measurement, but let's assume then that we identify that we've got a job to do, that something needs to change, and how do we set about doing that?
So first, people see the measurement on the screen openly, and it's confidential, anonymous, so no one is compromised in terms of how they might have scored a particular metric. Then the important thing is that the conversation is had about why the score is where it is. So what are some of the barriers that are in the way of a team, but also what are some of the enablers? Like, a team could be scoring particularly highly on a dynamic, and it's important to know why as well, because sometimes leaders, and I've seen this with some of the organizations that I work with, they're doing brilliant things that build psychological safety, but they're not explicitly aware of them. And then the challenge then is they may take their eye off that particular measure and cause it to be eroded in the medium or longer term. So it's not just about, measurement isn't just about let's find out all the things that are wrong. It's also about finding out what are the things that are happening that are really good in the team that can be doubled down on as well. And you can only do that in a conversation with the people who have that lived experience of the team, which is why every workshop like that is different.
But of course, if your measurements of data is showing you that there's an absence of psychological safety, then you immediately starting from being on your back foot, aren't you? Because you're trying to uncover the barriers to something you're trying to uncover the barriers, and people are not going to feel comfortable and confident or safe to speak up because they already don't think there's a psychologically safe environment for them to do so. So it's a bit of a challenge.
You're touching on something really important, and the irony is not lost on me that you end up having a discussion with the team that maybe psychological safety is compromised in some way, and then how do you then get them talking about it? All I can say is, after many of the workshops that I've run, what tends to happen towards the end is people say, we've had conversations today that we've never had. And that's the important part. And I've seen like really constructively people challenge the leader of the team with certain issues that were being caused, and leaders being comfortable facing into those blind spots. Why? Because they care so much that they've measured it in the first place, and they want to know what the issues are. So the leader plays a role in those particular workshops to set a tone, to say, look, I really want to improve this dynamic. I want us all to operate together better so we perform higher and everyone has a better experience. And when you set that tone, people do, in my experience, speak freely.
Yeah. So you and that's fine, isn't it? And you can do that at a senior leadership level, and you can do that in leadership development environments and so on. When you start to disseminate that down an organization to more granular level of, the shift supervisor, the team leader, whether it's in an operational role or office environment or whatever, we know, don't we, that particularly in the UK, although I think it's probably largely may well be the case elsewhere, we haven't been historically terribly good at supporting and providing our line manager cohorts with the skills to do the job that they do. We promote people who are good at a job, rather than necessarily people who've got the capacity or been trained to be good people leaders. And the emotional intelligence, the communication skills, the interpersonal skills, the compassionate leadership, all of these sorts of things are not necessarily things that are innate. And we're not terribly good at investing in all of those lower level line managers, and yet they bear a responsibility, don't they? They can very easily undermine, unintentionally, very easily undermine all the good work that perhaps the leadership team is doing. So what simple ways, or is there no simple way, to try and disseminate this more broadly?
Well, I can give you like 3 brilliant tips, which are like, and let me be really clear, these are straight from Amy Edmondson, rather than mine. I'm not going to steal anyone else's work, but and they're really simple when I explain them, but I'm not for a second saying they're easy to implement, right?
No, right, absolutely.
So the first thing is set the stage. So leaders, when they get their teams together, need to be really clear about their expectations of the project, but they also at the same time need to demonstrate their own vulnerability, that they haven't got all the answers, because guess what? They haven't. And because no one has. Like, we're all human beings. We don't have the answer to everything. And that old imperialistic leadership model of the 1980s of the superhero leader that knew everything is long gone. So setting the stage and being really clear on expectations, and also saying, look, I'm gathering you together because I haven't got all the answers. So set the stage. Second bit is invite participation. And by inviting participation, demonstrate some curiosity, demonstrate that you want to hear different perspectives. Inviting participation does not mean, I need all of you to speak up, because that tone is unlikely to be attractive to some people in the team to share their perspectives. And then the third bit is, when people do share their perspectives, respond appreciatively. And that doesn't mean that you agree with everything that everyone says. And it also doesn't mean that you don't have to make a final call. But understand that if someone takes a risk and go against the prevailing wisdom, especially if it's yours, then appreciate the fact that they brought a different perspective that may be an unlock now or sometime in the future. So if leaders can set the stage, invite participation, and then respond appreciatively when people do, that's a really great starting point to build psychological safety.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. As you say, though, not necessarily easy to do, but simple approach. Yeah. So we've already touched on measurement a little earlier on. As a result of being able to measure this stuff, have you had experience in the organizations that you've worked in or with where you've been able to see a change in a culture of psychological safety, having then had a measurable impact on the organization's success in some way?
I think the best example I would share with you is I did a workshop with a organization in the drinks industry back in December last year.
Mm-hmm.
And the workshop identified some things they were doing really well and some things that could improve. And I got an email from a board member of this particular team 5 months after the workshop had happened. And the email said they are still implementing the actions that they agreed off the back of the workshop, which for me was the start of sustainable behavior change.
Mm-hmm.
And that organization, what they are about to do is they're about to get employee engagement survey results. They're still probably a month or so away, that measure things like, in this business, I feel safe to speak up, which they will have a measurement for last year and they'll have a measurement for this year. So I'm kind of like sharing with you, I'm going to have to do a bit of a to be continued here, because I'm as eager to understand what that score is as they are, because that's been done before the workshop happened and will be done afterwards as well. But one of the best things I got was that email saying they're still implementing the behaviors that they agreed. Like, they weren't my ideas. They were agreed by the team, and that's why they're still implementing them, frankly, because they felt empowered to do that.
To do it. Yeah, lovely. Okay. We've got a few minutes left, and I'm pleased we have, because I want to just conclude with probably the $1 million question, that is fundamentally as a result of perhaps misunderstanding, but equally it's also about a lack of not really knowing quite how to go about doing this sort of stuff, which is this idea that creating an environment where everyone has psychological safety is basically giving people a free pass for not doing it, not having to do what they're supposed to do, and no longer not being accountable for their mistakes, their actions, their shortcomings, their failure to deliver on XYZ. Psychological safety is all terribly pink and fluffy, isn't it? And it's not really hard-nosed. Tell us a little bit about that, because you must get that thrown at you a lot.
I think it's a brilliant point, and it's what you're expressing is some of the misconceptions around it, right? So, for example, psychological safety means we've got to hear from everyone, therefore it's going to take too long. Well, actually, in my experience, the inverse is true. If you create a candid, energizing place to work where people can express themselves freely and professionally in the moment, you don't have that awful situation of 6 months later someone saying, well, I knew this wouldn't work. And you think, people will think, well, why didn't you say it back in like 6 months ago or so? And actually, the real question those leaders need to ask themselves is, what environment have I created whereby they couldn't raise it 6 months ago? So psychological safety doesn't take longer. Also, it is definitely not a civil war between psychological safety and accountability. You can have your cake and eat it. Like, when you've got people speaking freely and professionally and without fear of reprisal and openly, then accountability goes up, because it's clearer who's doing what and when they're going to deliver it as well. And if you have psychological safety, people feel much more comfortable, even though it can be uncomfortable, to talk about mistakes and to talk about failure and to own those mistakes. Because if they feel that they can bring up a story of something that went wrong and the organization can learn from it, rather than they need to hide it and bury it because they're worried about what's going to happen to them, well, then again, that puts you in a better position as well. So a lot of these myths about psychological safety tend to be generated from a skin deep understanding of a concept that's much more layered than that, and needs a bit more appreciation, because it's a bit more sophisticated than those statements.
Yeah, and also, I guess, coming back to the point about our line manager cohort not always being supported with the tools and the techniques and the training, to have a conversation with somebody about accountability, and having a challenging conversation, having a difficult conversation with someone about performance, doesn't have to be in the absence of being in a psychological safe environment, does it? They are not mutually exclusive, but they're not always supported and skilled to do that, perhaps. So that's another string to the L&D industry bow, I guess, really there, but they go alongside each other, don't they?
They do. They do. There's not a civil war between accountability and psychological safety. You can have both.
Yeah. We have we are out of time, but I've thoroughly enjoyed this. It's as enlightening as I knew it would be, actually, Gary. I'm going to just go over time for a few more seconds by asking you to close with just one thing. If there was one thing that you would like people to take away and have emblazoned on their forehead or tattooed on their forehead about psychological safety, what would that be?
I'd say just don't mistake it for people being nice and harmony. This is about creating a candid, energizing place to work. And if you go about trying to cultivate it and you don't get it right first time or second time, don't beat yourself up about it. Like, keep going. It takes time to build it, and it's to everyone's benefit.
Thank you very much indeed, Gary. Gary Keogh, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for listening to Engage for Success Radio. Don't forget you can download or stream any of the great shows from our archive at any time. Just visit engageforsuccess.org. And if you want to get involved in the movement, you can get in touch there as well. You will also find our latest employee engagement survey and index for the UK, the 2025 report, which is out now and contains lots of really useful facts and evidence and research around the topic. So thank you very much and good night.
Engage for Success Radio, raising the profile of employee engagement and shining a light on good practice for people who believe there's a better way to work.